Hi there, Teacher Chanel here. Today I wanted to talk about something really serious. As I'm pretty sure you have heard by now, yesterday we heard the news that Kate Spade, the creator of the brand Kate Spade, actually allegedly committed suicide on yesterday. And, you know, to be honest, I had never even seen Kate Spade, a picture of her, until yesterday. I've only been in a Kate Spade boutique a couple of times in my life, a couple of years ago. And this is the only Kate Spade piece that I own. It's this bracelet. And usually, you know, I think the only celebrity death that kind of stung a little bit for me was Whitney Houston. Michael Jackson, yeah, I was really sad about that, but it didn't sting like hearing about Whitney going. But then we hear about Kate Spade on yesterday, and like I said, really not all that familiar with her. Didn't even know what she looked like until yesterday. But the reason it impacted me so much is because I've been where she obviously was mentally. I suffered from depression from the time I was about 10 years old. That's my first memory of being depressed at 10. And I know you're like, well, what in the heck you have to be depressed about at 10 years old? Like, you don't have no bills, you don't have no responsibilities. Your only responsibility is to clean up your room and make sure you take a bath and brush your teeth every day. Like, that's really it. But what I've come to learn is that energy is real. And my mom, even though I didn't know at the time, my mom suffered from depression. And because she was vibrating at a certain, level energetically, then, our kids pick up on that. And as a child, I picked up on that from my mom. And so, at the age of 10, I remember sitting in my room. Now, we lived in this beautiful home in this beautiful neighborhood. We were the third Black family on the block. That says a lot. And, we were harassed, right? Because people didn't understand how a single woman could afford to live in this particular neighborhood. So we live in this beautiful home, and you would think as a child you would be super duper happy about that. And I was, for real. But for whatever reason, I was dealing with depression. So I sat on the side of my bed and I took the phone cord and I wrapped it around my neck. And I, both ends I just pulled in the opposite direction until I almost passed out. And I was like, yo, that was scary. You ever see that meme that says, I tried to commit suicide and I almost killed myself? That's pretty much how I felt at that moment. I was like, yo, not ready for that, I don't think, right? So over the years, it just got progressively worse and worse and worse because my mom worked a lot. She was an entrepreneur. She was a designer that could create and sew anything. And she specialized in wedding dresses, beaded head to toe, wedding dress. She was bad. So she worked a lot. And even though we were in the same home, she worked, in another room. I still felt like we lived in two separate places. And so my dad, bless his soul, was an alcoholic, and he wasn't really there. Like, he and my mom separated. I don't even know when they separated, but I was a little girl when they separated, because she was like, yeah, no, I'm not dealing with it. I dealt with it long enough. This is getting old. So even though I know my dad loved me, he was sick. Like, my dad was a sick person because he was addicted, right? So he really wasn't there. And so what I know now is that what I was dealing with were feelings of rejection from my dad, neglect from my dad, and rejection from my mom, even though that I know now that wasn't what she was doing. She was just working. Like, she had to pay the bills. Like, there was no man to help, right? She had to do it all on her own. So I understand that now, but at the time, as a kid, we tend to tell ourselves, you know, blame ourselves for certain things happening in the household. So then my depression, you know, feeling, you know, neglected by my father turned into, okay, so I can't get attention from my parents, so I'm going to start, you know, turning to boys, right? So then ultimately I ended up pregnant at the age of 14. And people were shocked because I was a very quiet girl. I never caused my mommy any trouble because I knew she would kill me. So I was a good kid, right? I went to school, I did my homework, I didn't bother nobody, came home before the street light came on. Like, you know, I was a good kid. So for me to end up pregnant at 14 after doing it one time, that's all it takes though, isn't it? Ended up pregnant, and I had my daughter at 15. So here we are. I'm a child trying to raise a child. I don't know the first thing about raising a child. I don't even know how to really take care of myself, you know, at this age. So it's like, oh my goodness, right? Then I meet my first husband when I was 17. And guess what? I got married when I was 18, and I married my father. Not literally, but I married a man who had the same issue as my father, which was alcoholism. And I'm not saying that to be disrespectful. He's a great father to our daughters, but I'm just saying, right? So my first husband and I struggled, like the struggle bus. We owned the struggle bus. And I was staying, you know, I was at home with the kids. At this point, I had 2 more daughters, 3 kids total, and he worked. But his habit, you know, he had to pay for that somehow. And so all of the money that he would earn working, he would pretty much drink it. And we moved 13 times in 1 year. Yes. You heard me correctly. 13 times in 1 year, because we couldn't afford to pay the bills because he would spend the money, the bill money, on alcohol, beer more specifically. And so this is just adding to my depression, right? I don't really know how to talk about it. I don't feel like I can talk about it without being judged. So I'm just suppressing, over the years, I'm just suppressing these feelings. And let me go back to my childhood. This is one thing that I actually taught myself to do, because I would have certain feelings that I didn't really know what to do with. So I would, you know, hold it in. And I would legit sit down and I would think about whatever it is that I'm dealing with at the time. I would swallow, and that was my way of saying, okay, it's gone, right? It's gone. I never have to think about that again. It's gone, right? I swallowed it. It's down in there somewhere. Boom, gone. That's what I would do. So then I get a divorce. Fast forward, I get married again. Okay, right? I get married again, and what was wrong with me, girl? What? So then I married this fool, this guy that I went to school with, that I thought I knew, but I didn't. And he turned out to be like a habitual liar. So at the time, I was living in Dallas in a beautiful home, living my life. Then I decided to move for love, right? Because he lived in our hometown of Beaumont, which is about 6 plus hours away from here. So we get there, and essentially we didn't have anywhere to live. So I left my house. I was renting it, but I left my house to be with a guy who didn't have a pipe nor a window. And here we are back on the struggle bus again. I'm like, oh my goodness, you got to be kidding me. So then I'm just like real low. I'm like, I can't do this. Oh, I skipped the whole relationship. Sorry, I skipped the whole entire relationship. So after I divorced my first husband, I then dated for about a year this guy who ultimately left me for my best friend. That's a whole story time that I'll do in another video. So then I get into another relationship. And this one was abusive, physically, mentally, emotionally, all that, right? Everything on the outside looked amazing. We had a brand new 4,100 square foot home. We had like 4 vehicles. You know, I was just getting into real estate. $10,000 checks were just coming left and right. Everything appeared on the outside to be amazing. However, I was getting my ass kicked on a regular in front of my daughters. Okay. More depression. Okay. So then, I had finally, for the final time, left my boyfriend at the time. And we had twins. They're 8 now. I think they were like, what year is this? They were about a year old or so. A little less than, a little, somewhere around a year old. 10 months old to be exact. Okay. And we went over there. He invited us to his apartment. Cool, because he wanted to spend time with the kids. He didn't know how to handle the kids by themselves. These are his only children. So I was there just to make sure he didn't like drop one of the kids on the head or something, you know, by accident, of course. And because I knew that he would never hurt them. So he's a very controlling individual. And so I was just sitting there. I'm there, but I'm not there. I'm like, listen, you're supposed to be spending time with your kids. I'm just here as a mere formality. Ignore, I don't exist, right? So I'm on my phone scrolling on Facebook. And so he gets upset about something and he tries to take my phone out of my hand. I'm like, no. So here we are tussling over the phone. And it turns into this big thing. And somehow I winded up on the ground, and there was his vacuum right there. He picked up the vacuum, threw it on top of me. And then I get up to try, because at this point he had my phone in his pocket. So I get up to go to the kitchen trying to get to the landline, and he yanks the cord out of the wall, and then I ended up against the, what do you call that thing? The refrigerator. So he's like elbowing me in my ribs right here, just elbowing me, you know. And then he elbows me here in my jaw area. Then he bites me on my pinky, and this is what I deem as the worst incident that happened. There were many over the years. I still have a scar right there. Can y'all see that? It's right there. This is a rug burn. These are burns just because from the oven child. But this right here is a rug burn that happened in 2006. This is the first time he put his hands on me. I should have left, but I didn't. He put me in a chokehold, threw me to the ground, and that's how this happened. Anyway. So ultimately I get away from him, call the cops. He had never been arrested, BTW. When we lived in that 4,100 square foot home, never got arrested. I called the cops several times. He was never arrested. I'll never forget, there were 3 cops that came one time. And they're walking in our home, walking in the garage, and they're like, oh my God. One of them was like, oh my gosh, this is such a beautiful home. Looking at we had the brand new front loader washers that were real popular back then. Loved our cars, loved our house, loved this is all this stuff, right? And he tells my ex, He says, she'll be okay. Just take her out to dinner. She'll be all right. What in the? Yes, that actually happened. So back to this incident, police officer came, got my story, got his story. He was acting all crazy and he was arrested. So I had to call my mom because he had taken the keys. We had purchased a van together. I had the van, but he took the keys. So I had to call my mom, who lived 2 hours away. She sent my brother and I can't remember, somebody else that came. And I could barely walk the next day. I felt like, I don't really know what it feels like to be run over by a car. Don't ever want to know. But I'm pretty sure it was pretty close to how I was feeling. I couldn't walk. My jaw was swollen like out to here. I had to talk like this because my jaw was swollen shut. And my body just ached all over. I fell into the deepest depression I had ever been in. I stopped eating. I forget how much weight I lost in like a month. I'm okay with losing weight without trying. I'm okay with that. But I had lost a whole lot of weight. And I went into this deep depression where I was blaming God for everything. I was crying every single day. It was just a mess, right? It was a mess. So then, that's something else that I just kind of suppressed. I felt real judged by my mom, who I love. Don't get it twisted. I love my mom. But, she was the type that would say, oh, I would never, man, put his hands on me, So, I felt really judged. So I didn't feel as though I had anybody I could really talk to. Like, who can relate to this? Nobody in my life at that time. Or at least that I knew of, right? Because most people don't talk about it. So then I get married to the doofus. And here we are living like in a room in his godfather's house. And I'm like, how old am I to be living in a room? Child, listen, that didn't last long at all. I got the hell out of there. But because, again, I don't know how to really process things, I just go into this depressed mode. Instead of trying to figure out how to fix it, I just go into this depressed state. So I had my ex, the one that was abusive. We're cordial now. For the sake of our children, but that took a long time to get there. So I called him and I said, hey, I just need you to come and get the kids this weekend. I need a break. So he came, he got them. And all the while I planned on ending it. And so I ended up in a parking lot and I took a concoction of sleep meds. I think it was some Vicodin that I had. Something like Vicodin. I think it was actually Vicodin. And I just lay there in my car just waiting. Ultimately, my ex-husband, where we lived in my hometown of Beaumont, it's like that big. He actually was able to find me via the location on my iPad. So he was able to find me there, and he came, he called the ambulance, and I ended up in a behavioral center on suicide watch for 11 days. I felt like I was in jail, legit. I felt like I was in prison, even though I've never been, but I'm pretty sure, again, that's how it would feel. Like the walls were brick, this white brick. Everything was white. It was brick and had windows, but they were way up at the top of the ceiling, so you couldn't see out of the window. And they were like this, maybe this big, right? They were so dusty and dirty that the natural light really couldn't even flow the way it should have. You couldn't wear like sneakers with shoestrings. You couldn't have belts. You couldn't, nothing with strings, no strings. And they just were giving you this medication every day, which I refused. I was like, I'm not taking that. I don't know what that is. I'm sitting here watching these people walk around zombified, and this one guy, he actually started at one end of the hall, ran full. I mean, this dude was running like 20 miles an hour, I swear. And he runs head first into one of the doors of the bedrooms. And these doors were solid. And I was like, oh my God, he did. But he didn't die. I don't know. So I'm like, listen, y'all giving these same pills to those people? I ain't gonna be able to do it. I refuse to take it, which is why initially I was supposed to be in there only 3 days. But because I was hostile and I refused to take these meds, they kept me there longer. So while it was messed up that I was in there, you know, I wasn't eating because I'm like, what in the world? That's not, I don't care what y'all say, that's not food. I'm not eating that. So I wasn't eating. No one was allowed to like bring outside food in. It was terrible. But while I was there, I was able to, all you have time to do is think. It's you and your thoughts, that's it. So I asked my husband at the time to bring me a journal. And I started journaling. And I have to say that actually changed my life. Because I had the opportunity to sit and figure out what the hell was wrong with me, right? What is going on? Seeing these people with these real mental challenges was very sobering. You know, I'm sitting up here watching people talk to themselves, even though I talk to myself, and I answer myself too. So call it crazy if you want. I get a lot of bomb visions and ideas talking to myself, even though I say it's really, I'm talking to God. But anyway, so, you know, there were people who would talk to themselves. There was a couple in there. I think they met while they were in there. And they felt like they could speak to each other telepathically, which I believe is real. Yeah, I do. I believe in unicorns and fairy dust. So who am I to say that something is impossible? You know, there was one black guy in there who hated white people. He hated white people. At some point in his life or in a past life, some white person stole his shoes. So every white person that would come in, he tried to kill him because he felt like they stole his shoes. True story. So this dude was violent as hell. He was strong as hell. It would take like 4 of the, what do you call them people? Like the, you know, the, what were they called? You know, the people that worked on that particular floor. They weren't nurses. They were whatever they were called. So these people had like some real issues. So it made me realize, number one, your life is not that bad. Like, it is fixable. As long as you still have control of your mind, it can be fixed. Like, whatever it is can be fixed. You know what I'm saying? So it was there that I had to really take time to assess what I felt like was wrong. So I ultimately wrote letters to my mom, to my dad, and to my ex, because those were the people who affected me the most. My dad at that point was already gone. He died in 06. I had to write a forgiveness letter to him, and I expressed exactly how I felt, why I felt that way, and you know, that was my release of that. And then my mom, although she was alive at the time, my mom suffered from depression. My mom, now these are things that I know now. My mom suffered from depression. She was dealing with some things that she didn't really know how to process. So you know, she didn't have what it took to really help to heal me. You get what I'm saying? Because she didn't know how to heal herself. As an adult, she found out that her daddy was not really her daddy. You know, the father that she had grown up to believe was her dad, even though he died when she was young, that wasn't his daddy. So my mom was dealing with some things as well. So I had to fix this on my own. So even though my mom was still alive, I knew that she wouldn't talk about it. You know what I mean? Because she didn't know how. She was invited by a counselor while I was still in the behavioral center. She was invited by one of the counselors to come and have a session with me. She didn't show up. She said she was on her way, but she never showed up. So I knew at that point, okay, I have to forgive, release, and move on, because otherwise, you know, I'm going to be stuck here. And I had to do the same with my ex as well. He's never apologized. He's never acknowledged or anything. So I had to start that healing process for me by myself. So I said all of this to say, depression is a very real thing. And it's something that should be talked about. Therapy wasn't for me. I did go to therapy, and the therapist, you know, treated me like I was a crackhead. And all they wanted to do was drug me up, and I wasn't here for it. And so I had to figure out how to do it on my own. Ultimately, I started reading. I started self-developing. And I ordered 32 books in 1 month, and I read every single one of them. And that was how I was able to heal myself. While you may feel like, I'm talking to people who are dealing with depression, you may feel like you're by yourself. Hell, you may be by yourself. You may not have anyone that you can talk to, you know, openly about this, but you have to figure something out. Figure out what works for you. Counseling for a lot of people works. But for me, like I said, it was self-development. Get some help, some way, somehow. If you are somebody that knows of a person who deals with depression, don't judge them. That's the last thing that they need, is judgment. Do what you can to help them. And lastly, in the brown people community, we don't really talk about depression. And I think this is why my mom didn't talk about it. It's why I didn't talk about it, because all we say in our community is to pray about it. Oh, just pray about it, God will fix it. Well, you know, that's the worst thing that you can say to somebody who's dealing with depression, because chances are they are in a space and a place of blaming God for what they're going through. I did the same thing, you know, so telling me to pray about it, listen, that was sent me over the edge, right? So that's a very dismissive thing to say, number one, because what you should do if someone is trying to open up to you and tell you that or share with you what they're experiencing, and you just say, oh, just pray about it, it's dismissive. And you should, you know, do what you can to help that individual so that they don't, you know, do what I tried to do so many times and kill yourself, or do what Kate Spade did, or so many other people in this world have done. And lastly, did I say lastly already? Well, lastly, again, defining depression as a mental illness is also a what not to do. Okay, I'm not mentally challenged at all. I've never been diagnosed with any type of mental illness or challenge. I was depressed. Depressed people are very, very hurt people. And for most of us, that's where depression comes from. It comes from a really deep, unhealed hurt. Okay, so don't, you know, people now are saying that, you know, Kate Spade was dealing with she dealt with mental illness for a long time. And Maybe she really did, but that's not the case for all of us, is all I'm saying. You know what I mean? So don't say that as a way to just, you know, push it under the rug. Oh, they're mentally ill, they need to go get some meds, they'll be okay. No, we need to deal with it. Depression comes from some part of your past that you're still living in, you're still reliving over and over and over in your head. That is, in my opinion, where depression comes from. It's a hurt that is still in your past that you need to deal with. And I had to deal with it. You know, I had to forgive, even though these people never asked for forgiveness. But forgiveness is really always for us. And that is how I overcame it. But guess what? I liken it to, now I've never been addicted to any drug, but I liken it to that, like recovery from some type of drug. You know, you're always in recovery, and that's how I feel about depression. It is a forever state of recovery, right? Because the residue of depression is still there. That impression on the cellular level is still there. So I have to be very careful, and I have to guard my energy with my everything. I no longer watch the news, so if I don't see it on Instagram's Explore page, I have no idea what's going on in the world. I do not engage in low vibrational conversations. I don't gossip about people. It's just not what I'm about, right? People that know me in real life and have access to me, my phone or whatever, you're not allowed to send me articles about somebody getting shot or, you know, whatever in the world. Like my ex would do that a lot up until recently. I'm like, yo, I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, stop sending me that. If you don't stop sending me these articles, I'm going to block you. And I mean that. I've been on the phone, you know, having conversations with people, and the conversations went left, and it turns out that they're talking about people and this and that. I will hang up quick, with the quickness. I will hang up on you because I can't. You know what I mean? I have to protect my energy at all costs, because it's a slippery slope. It's real easy, that muscle memory is real easy for me to go back into this depressed state. So I'm very, very cautious at this point. So if you are somebody that's dealing with depression, listen, get help. One way or another, get some help. I posted on Instagram yesterday about Kate Spade, and this is what I'm going to read really quickly, what I said. And I got some great feedback, you know, people saying that, you know, that they were appreciative of my transparency, but I don't really see it as, I'm just a very transparent person anyway. But I shared a picture, and this is the picture, myself when I had hair, and my two old co-workers. And we were in the Kate Spade store. So it says Kate Spade Boutique 2016 when I had hair. To be honest, I've never seen a picture of her before today, but the news of her suicide hit home because I've tried and failed many times. I suck at killing myself. I've been where she obviously was mentally. It's a very lonely place to be. We convince ourselves that our families and the world would be better off without us. Thankfully, I found a way to overcome my depression through self-development. Therapy didn't work for me because all they wanted to do was drug me up. And in quotations, I say, but after I take these pills, I'm still depressed. So nah, that was a hard no for me. I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone, so I suppressed how I really felt, which was the worst thing one could do. There are always signs and hints, but you really have to pay attention. I'm sure if her family and friends think back to their last convo with her, they will remember something she said that was a cry for help. But we are too busy to really listen nowadays. Depression is real, but it's nothing to be ashamed of. Hopefully, this will cause us to talk about it more without judgment. So that is what I had to say about, you know, the passing of Kate Spade. And I just thought I was prompted to, this is a very long video, I was prompted to share my depression story and, you know, my physical abuse story as well, you know. So I really hope that this video helps somebody get some help. It's not worth it. There are people who love you, who care about you, who want to see you win. But sometimes you just got to remove yourself out of certain environments. Maybe your environment is very toxic and you need to get out of that environment in order to save your own life. You know, Kate Spade, outside of her condo, there are fans that came from all over just to stand in front of the building that she lived in. So I'm sure she convinced herself that she wasn't loved, but obviously she was, you know what I mean? So get some help. I hope that this story helps at least one person. Be sure to like this video, subscribe. Follow me on Instagram. If you have a story that you want to share with me, if you want to talk, you know, I'm here. You can find me on Instagram at Tedra Chanel. Thank you all again for watching. See y'all in the next.